episode of the Low Budget Review Show. I'm your host, Eric Smith, and today I'm talking about Blood Sacrifices by Brian Moreland. This is from Sam Hain Publishing, and it's a collection of 3 novellas and a very short story, 4 tales of terror, with a wonderful cover. I'm going to very quickly go over the 4 stories, and then after that I'll get into the meat of the book. So the first story is that short story. It's about 10 pages long. It's called The Girl from the Blood Coven. And it's actually a prequel to The Witching House. So The Girl from the Blood Coven takes place 40 years ago. We've got Sheriff Travis Keegan. It's the end of his work day. He's gone to the bar to get a drink. While he's there, this girl, Abigail Blackwood, walks in, and she's covered in blood. Think Carrie from the end of the movie Carrie. So she walks into the bar, and she's from the Blevins house, which is considered this hippie commune. And she walks in, she says, everybody has been murdered. It's just a slaughter. Everybody's dead. So the sheriff takes her, calls up some of his deputies, and he needs to find out what happened. And that's all I'm going to tell you about it at the moment. So that's the first story, The Girl from the Blood Coven. Next we have The Witching House. This takes place modern day, so it's 40 years after the events of The Girl from the Blood Coven. And we have Sarah Donovan. She's divorced. She's got a new boyfriend named Dean. He's a very adventurous guy. And so Sarah and Dean and a couple of their friends, Meg and Casey, are going on a mystery trip. It's a mystery to Sarah. It's eventually revealed that Dean, Meg, and Casey are urban explorers. They like to go to abandoned buildings and explore them. They break in, they map them out, they tape them, and they post this information for other urban explorers who might want to investigate these places. And of course, they're going to the Blevins house. So they meet up with a local named Ronnie, who's going to show them the house. He tells them the history. He tells them about the murders, the massacre 40 years ago, which of course freaks out Sarah, but the others are excited to go and check this place out. So they go, and this is a horror story, so things don't go too well. And that's all I have to say about this one at the moment, The Witching House. The third story is Darkness Rising. I read and reviewed this when it first came out as an ebook, so I'm going to have a link to that review. I'm not going to go as deep into this one as I do the other stuff here, because you can just go and look at the old review. But it's the story of Marty Weaver. He's a poet, and he works as a janitor, maintenance man kind of thing at this college. And he's got a crush on one of the students there. He's helped her with her English homework. And he has kind of a bad day, so he goes down to the lake to just, be by himself, write some poetry. Unfortunately, there are 3 psycho killers there. And that's when this becomes not just a nice little poetic love story, but a supernatural tale of revenge. And that's Darkness Rising. The final story is The Vagrants. Now, this is the story of Daniel Finley. He's a journalist, and he wants to write about the homeless problem in the hopes that he can make a difference. He wants to help the homeless. So for 6 months, he's been undercover, living under a bridge in Boston with the homeless. And a very strange and frightening thing happens while he's there with the homeless. He's able to escape, and he writes his book. We jump ahead 2 years. He's getting the rest of his advance. The book is about to come out. He's going on a book tour. But the past, of course, rears its ugly head in the form of not just the incident that happened to him when he was living with the homeless, but some problems with the Irish mob, and he kind of gets caught between the deadly criminal element and deadly supernatural forces, and everything comes to a head, and that's the Vagrants. So, um, this book, absolutely fantastic. Brian Moreland has such a visual writing style. Now, he falls in between. You have those writers that are very verbose. It's a term I use a lot for certain writers. They go into incredible detail. Then you have those writers that are very sparse, short, sharp sentences. Moreland falls right in between. He very much, well, he falls into that sort of Sam Hain style or feel, but there's something about the way he writes that just is incredibly visual. As I'm reading these stories, I can see them more so than a lot of other authors. You as you read, you picture it in your head, um, and some writers give you a decent picture. But writers like Moreland, it's vivid. It's HD. This is Blu-ray quality writing. Um, IMAX quality writing. I don't know how else to put it. Uh, I can just see it so clearly in my head, and I really I get sucked in, and it's just it really pulls you in. Even something as short as The Girl from the Blood Coven, about 10 pages long, um, and it's just a quick smack in the face. Um, Really sets you up for what's coming in the rest of these stories, especially The Witching House, of course, since it's a little prequel to that. Um, and as I said, I suppose it helps that I do watch a lot of horror movies. So when he describes Abigail Blackwood coming in covered in blood, I already have a visual reference because I've seen Carrie. I've seen the remake of Carrie. So I have that visual reference, and I can see it so clearly when he describes it. Um, and The Girl from the Blood Coven, like I said, it's very quick. It's a slap in the face again. It's brutal and horrifying in points, um, and mysterious, which of course leads into The Witching House. Um, so this is novella length. The last three are novella length, so this is the first of those. Um, Really great characters. He develops the characters so well, and we see most of the story through the eyes of Sarah. She's our main character, um, but we get to know them well enough. Sarah's not in every scene, but she's still the one that's our eyes into this world. So really nice character work. He develops first novella length. Obviously, you've got more space than a short story, but not as much as a novel or a Stephen King book that's going to be that thick. Uh, but he uses the page count that he has to full effect to give us the characters, to give us the story. Um, I mean, he develops basically 6, 7 characters, um, and also has plenty of time for some history. We get some flashbacks, all sorts of stuff going on here, and yet it's still just it moves forward at a good pace. It's horrifying, it's brutal, and it's again incredibly visual. There's one scene in particular with Megan Casey. I'm not going to tell you uh, the particulars of the scene because you really have to read this for yourself. But it's Megan Casey, the friends of Sarah and Dean, and they're down in the cellar of the Blevins' house, and there's something horrific going on. And again, I can just see it perfectly. And then something happens, and I literally sat up in my chair and said, "Oh shit!" And it just kind of came out of nowhere. which not in a bad way. It's just I was not expecting this thing to happen. And again, because I was so pulled in and I could see it so well, it was just it was shocking. Um, which I mean, I really, to me, that's some of the I can't think of greater praise. Um, if an author makes you care about the characters and if he can shock you, um, I mean, that's isn't that what these stories are for? Uh, so yeah, the Witching House really has some amazing things going on. The visuals are fantastic, and I love what he did in that one scene with Megan Casey. It was fantastic. Um, and yeah, so the Witching House, top notch. Darkness Rising. Again, I'm gonna have a link. You can check that out for a full review of this one. But again, I really enjoyed it, and I think I said in the old review, I didn't go back and watch it, but I believe I said there were aspects of it that reminded me of Clive Barker. Um, just again, none of this is derivative of any other authors. It's just again, it might be because I watch so many movies, because I read so much that I have these references in my head already. So there were some things in here that just, in the filing system of my brain, I'm like, okay, Clive Barker, I can see that. Um, and that's what happened when I read Darkness Rising. Again, Marty Weaver, a very great character, um, and some great visual stuff going on in this one as well. There's a little prologue. It's one page, and again, it's like a punch in the gut. I could picture it perfectly, and it's quick and brutal, and then it leads into what starts out as kind of a love story. You've got this poetic guy working at the college, crush on the girl, and then it just twists and becomes this amazing, horrifying, supernatural story that's still kind of a love story, definitely a horror story. Um, really good stuff. Check out the old review. And then move on to The Vagrants, the final story here. And this one, again, I was actually uh, thought of two Clive Barker stories. Uh, One was the Midnight Meat Train, and again, not because of any specific content. Simply, uh, in the story The Vagrants, there's some stuff that happens in the subway system, stuff that happens underground, and that just brought to mind Midnight Meat Train because subways. And then the other thing was uh, Candyman. I can't. It's on the tip of my brain, but I can't think of the actual name of this Clive Barker story. But it was the basis for the movie Candyman, and that's because the Vagrants also sort of deals with urban legends, graffiti, inner city kind of stuff, which brought to mind, again, not derivative in any way, just to me, this is how my brain works. I thought of Candyman. Man, it's that title's like right here, trying to push its way to the forefront. The title of the actual short story. Um, I'll think of it as soon as I'm done recording this video, of course. um, but anyway, so those two things came to mind. Um, and again, a great character in Daniel Finley. Um, he's living with the homeless. He has to every night when he goes into his tent, he has to pull out his journal and write down his name. And he writes down, "My name is Daniel Finley. I am not one of them." And he'll write it over and over. He has to remind himself because he's getting basically lost amongst the homeless. And then especially when this weird thing happens, this group of homeless people show up. They call themselves the Seekers, and they have this very charismatic leader. And Daniel's been living with these homeless people for 6 months. there's sort of this core group that he's friends with, and then he knows the other people because it's a pretty decent size, I suppose. I don't know much about homeless camps, but I suppose it's a pretty decent sized homeless camp. He knows a lot of the people there. Um, and he does talk about, there's the ones that have had bad luck, um, and are trying to, they're trying to find jobs. They're trying to pick themselves up and get back to where they were before. There's a few that just decided they were tired of society and chose to become homeless. And then, of course, there's the drug addicts and the drunks. But it's all still a little microcosm. And then the Seekers show up and with their leader. And slowly, all the people that Daniel knows start to join the Seekers. Just every night, it seems like Daniel's group is getting smaller. And so some stuff's going on there. And in the end, Daniel has to get away, go back to the real world, writes his book. So again, as I mentioned way back at the beginning of this video, 2 years goes by. The book's coming out. Daniel's doing the book tour. And he meets a college professor who's actually been studying urban legends. And he takes Daniel and shows him some graffiti of a group of people with a charismatic leader. And of course, Daniel recognizes the Seekers, and he recognizes the leader. And the professor tells him that there have been versions of this picture all over the country. They're all like underground in subway tunnels and abandoned tunnels and places. So that's, of course, Candyman kind of came to mind there, as well as Midnight Meat Train. So then Daniel kind of is getting pulled back in. And then he also finds out that his father is in debt to the Irish mob. And he gets involved in that. And that sort of crosses over with what's going on with the other stuff. And it all ties together very nicely. It's pretty organic, what's going on. It doesn't feel forced, all of these different elements coming together. And it all builds to an incredibly wild climax. And again, I can just picture it so perfectly. Everything that happens. And it does get crazy. I think what goes on in The Vagrants is probably the wildest thing that happens in the book. And there's some wild stuff that happens in this book. But it's over the top. Not in a bad way. In a really good way. Over the top in The Vagrants. Just a fantastic story. I know I'm being very repetitive just because this really affected me reading this. Just the amazing way. I don't know. As I said, he's not so incredibly detailed that he doesn't go on and on and on for pages with his descriptions. What he does write is incredibly effective and puts that picture in your head. At least it did mine. I hope it does yours, because I highly recommend this, which brings me to my rating. I don't think it's going to surprise anybody. The picture may. And it does have to do with the story, the book, one of the stories. But I give Blood Sacrifices by Brian Moreland. I'm giving it, oh, my lighting is horrible. I'm giving it 5 out of 5 little piggies. Can you see that? 5 out of 5 little piggies. You're going to have to read it to find out why I went with the little piggies, but I just the effect that this had on me, just fantastic horror. Really, I think this is gonna go in the top 10 for the year. I already have a few books that are locked in to my top 10, but I think it's safe to say this is going in there as well. Just incredibly effective. Characters that you care about. horrifying things happening to those characters, which I love. Um, just wonderful visual storytelling. Um, so, again, that's 5 out of 5 little piggies for Blood Sacrifices by Brian Moreland. I love that cover. I thought about just copying skulls from the cover, but decided I'd go with the little piggies for my own reasons. Again, read the book to find out why. Um, so that's it. Uh, if you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put them in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. We try to be polite here at the Low Budget Review Show. I don't think I gave anything away in this one. I did go into a little bit of detail in some of this. I think in the Vagrants, maybe. But I don't think I gave anything away. Be sure to click on that link and check out my full review for Darkness Rising if you're more interested in that one. I'll have links for you to pick up the book in the description below. And please like, share, and subscribe. This has been the Low Budget Review Show. I have been Eric Smith. And until next time, read more books.